Now, more and more children and young people we know are getting interested in climate change and eco-activism, and some children genuinely are worried. Here's an email we've had in this morning, actually, from a listener in Derbyshire who says, "My son is 9. He asked me if he'll die when he's 20 because of climate change, and it breaks my heart, and I don't know what to tell him because I really don't want him to worry too much." We need everybody, including children, to know this is an emergency, though, and to take action. So there's the view of one listener. So we thought we'd talk today about how you talk to your children, if you have them, about what's going on at the moment. Caroline Hickman is a climate change researcher from the University of Bath. Caroline, good morning to you.
Good morning.
She's also a Climate Psychology Alliance executive.
Yes.
Fiona Cowan is a head teacher at Bolsover Infant School in Derbyshire. Good morning to you, Fiona.
Good morning.
Now, you've completed the Educate Global Climate Change Teacher Academy, accredited by the UN. What does that mean?
So that's a training course that takes about 20 hours to complete, which gives you an adult-led view of climate change using lots of research and knowledge so that you are able to teach our children well.
OK, and Ella Mann joins us too. She is a climate activist from Oxford. Good morning to you, Ella. Right, Caroline, I know you've conducted interviews with children from the UK and also from the Maldives, where the effects of climate change are really being felt. So what did you learn from those interviews?
Absolutely. Well, I've been talking with children for the last 5 years, which I think is important because this was before Greta Thunberg and the school climate strikers started to sort of become well known. So this is what children have been saying to me for some time, and what I'm really noticing is that they're clear-sighted about the destructive impact of global warming on both themselves and on other populations, but also other species, on nature. So they've got a strong empathy with nature and the natural world. So they're saying things to me like, and they're also very insightful. The age for taking the environment for granted is long past. We now need to be thinking about the future. People need to be listening to children. If we listen to children, then maybe our children will inherit a world in which they can bear to bring their own children. So children are thinking not just about the impact on themselves, but the impact on future children and the environment.
So our listener who emails to say that she has a 9-year-old who's worried that he will die at 20, that's not uncommon.
It's not that uncommon, no. But what I think is unusual is that many children haven't been talking about this up until now, but they're now beginning to talk about it more and more. So it's becoming more visible. But it has been going on for some time, and I think it's...
I just want to bring it. Sorry, excuse me. I just want to bring in Fiona.
Sure.
Fiona, you're there with small children because yours is an infant school. Did you do that course accredited by the UN because you felt there was a real need, because kids were asking you about this stuff?
Yeah, I think we as a school have been looking at climate change for a good few years now. This course came online in May time, and I felt it was really important that we made sure that we were teaching children correctly, giving them the proper view about what's happening.
And not making them unnecessarily fearful.
Absolutely, because what the course teaches you is to empower people, to empower children, to empower women, to be able to support and help themselves.
Have you had small kids coming to you in distress about this?
I can't say we've experienced children in distress, but we've had lots of interesting questions. We teach our children at school to think for themselves and to ask questions, to be independent in their thought. And as a result of that, children do ask difficult questions. But it's about listening to those children and responding to them appropriately with the facts, and empowering them to believe and understand that they can do something.
And what about parents? Because Bolsover is a place that I have to say I wouldn't immediately associate it with widespread concern about climate change. I mean, that's a generalisation and I apologise for it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Bolsover's right in the centre of England. It's right by the M1.
It's an ex-mining community, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And you do think that it would be a topic that wasn't really sort of on people's radar. But actually what we've found over the last 3 or 4 months is we've seen a huge interest from the community. We've got parents setting up recycling sites on Facebook. We've got people asking to have meetings where we can discuss these issues. Parents have been extremely positive in the work that we've been doing, because I think we've taken an approach that's very child friendly, it's very age appropriate, and we're walking children through the knowledge that they need in order to discuss this appropriately.
And Ella, tell us, how have you come to be a climate activist?
Well, it's been a long journey. I think it started with a a love for the natural world, and I think that's a really important starting point for many young people, because obviously if you have a connection to the natural world, you have an urge to protect it. And so yeah, I think the removal of children from the natural world, which we're experiencing at the moment, is...
What do you mean by
really,
the removal from the natural world?
Well, I mean, the amount of children who play in natural places has decreased massively over the last decade, from kind of half to like less than 1 in 10, I think. And this is extremely dangerous, because obviously if you don't have experience of being in the natural world, you're not going to want to protect it. You know, if the most nature you've experienced is a little bit of grass outside your house, that's not really, you know, you're not going to fight to protect that. Whereas if you've experienced the full wonder of the natural world, then you have an urge to fight for it.
I wonder exactly, Fiona, what you teach the pupils at your school. Which lessons actually are about climate change? Where do you shoehorn it into the curriculum?
So, shoehorn's an interesting way of phrasing it, because obviously the curriculum's jam-packed, there's lots to teach. We've always delivered a broad and balanced curriculum at school, but, you know, my children are 3 to 7, and they need to learn the basic skills of reading and writing.
Of course.
What we've tried to do is embed it within what we're already teaching, so that it's not become a bolt-on part of the curriculum. So a lot of what we do is about what we were always doing. I think it's just interesting what our friends just said about children having an understanding and a love of the natural world. That's a lot of where we start with our children, going out into the woods, doing lots of adventurous activities. We spent a lot of time working on our outdoor area. Those are things we've always done, but the idea now is that as part of that, we include knowledge and discussions around climate change and the concepts. So, for example, last week our children went out on a walk around the village. That was talking about preparing to write stories, actually, but it was also a mapping exercise for geography. But as part of that, they were also looking at how many washing lines had washing on, how many solar panels they could see.
Right.
Because when they returned back into class, the teachers had quite lengthy conversations about why would we be looking for washing lines, and what would people be using if they're not using their washing lines, and what would the impact of that be? And so the children are not doing it as a separate subject.
No, I get that. That sounds, I mean, you're going out there, and everything you're doing and learning, it's embedded in real life and the local community. That makes perfect sense to me. Caroline, what about dietary changes? I mean, my kids went vegetarian, still are vegetarian, but I have to say, you know, they still leave lights on, still have lots of showers, and still never turn down a lift. So what do you say about young people's attitudes to all this, actually?
Well, it's complicated. I think you've got to deal with both practical and emotional solutions. You can't just focus on external practical solutions. We've also got to be talking to children about how they feel. So you can deal with it on a practical level by talking to them about the milks that you buy, get a different range of milks.
I mean, the thing about cow's milk is, and I appreciate there are arguments against it, although not from Britain's dairy farmers, of course.
There are arguments against corn-fed
cows. But it's cheaper than many of the alternatives. And of course, jobs depend. Farming, in the farming community, jobs depend on the continuation of dairy farming. But other alternatives are expensive, more expensive.
They are. But in the long term, are we talking about short-term or long-term solutions? In the long term, we are going to need to make these adjustments. So we have to actually have economic and political solutions that will enable the communities to make these changes. So we can't get stuck on it costs more. We actually have to address what is the bigger issue, which is the long-term survival of our communities and the planet. So we do have to find ways to address these complicated things.
Is there proof that doing something about the environment, whether it's recycling or cutting down on the amount of red meat you eat, for example, makes children feel less fearful about the future, makes them think they're doing something?
I don't think that on its own makes children less fearful. I think you have to do that in relationship with others, with other children, with adults, with schools. it's a relational issue. It's not just a practical issue. We're not going to save the planet, so to speak, by just planting trees or switching off cow's milk. We also have to be working together in community, and we have to take care of the emotional feelings which are underpinning the anxieties, which is grief and sadness and anger and despair and frustration from the point of view of the young people. The adults haven't stepped up and done enough to deal with this up until now. So actually that's what's causing more anxiety for young people than anything else, is they need to see adults taking action on this.
Ella?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you really have to take care of the emotional well-being of us young people, because we are very angry and very frustrated that we're just kind of coming into this world that's, you know, just breaking, just falling apart.
Would you recommend school strikes then, Ella? Is it something you supported?
Yeah. So I organised the first couple of strikes in Oxford, and I found it a massively empowering thing to do. Not only because it sort of gave me a way to sort of channel that anger and sadness that I felt, but also that it was so well supported by the adults. You know, the adults weren't saying, you have to do it this way, you know, we have all the answers. They were saying, we really support what you're doing, how can we help you? And that was such an incredibly empowering thing, because...
Yeah, I get that. But of course, Fiona, as a head teacher, I can't believe for 1 minute that you would endorse school strikes, and not least because your school's doing its best to teach the subject properly.
It's an interesting journey, actually, this, because as a school we didn't really want to endorse children missing in school. So we talked about the fact that we would spend the day in September talking about climate change, teaching about climate change, and we would commit every Friday to have a message as part of our work that we do. However, with conversations with the parents in school, actually what they were saying is that we need to show that our children have got a voice, and we need to talk to them about what peaceful protest looks like, and to give them an opportunity to say what they want.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Fiona Cowan, who is from Bolsover Infant School, and you heard too from the climate activist Ella Mann and Caroline Hickman from the University of Bath. To your thoughts on this matter, let's see. Sarah, I'm glad you're covering this. My children are still young and not fully aware, but I am so scared for when things do become more apparent for them. As a mum, I get scared and depressed when I think about their future. When I hear them talking of their hopes and plans for their future, I find the innocence of what's around the corner very painful. I also worry that my own stress about it must be having an impact on them. As a mother, I feel I have to do everything I can to try and help avert this crisis, and I wish the government and people in power would do the same. I would feel a lot less anxious if I could see proper action being taken and everybody working together to alleviate the problems. I think the lack of action is what is most terrifying. From Sheila, instead of full-on scaremongering, why not remind the children that digging up the garden and concreting over and cutting down trees because they make a mess is not kind to the world which is changing. Be gentle, show respect for nature, and their awareness will evolve without worry. Well, that's what I feel. Tracy says, we must start to behave as responsible adults. We should allow children to be children and allow them to grow up in an environmentally safe world. Mike, this is echoing something I was saying earlier, actually. I'm sad to hear about these kids. I felt the same as a child in the 60s about nuclear war. Mike, I was saying that certainly in the early 80s, everybody I knew was pretty much obsessed by the prospect of nuclear war. But, you know, is it the same as the fear about climate change? I'm not entirely sure. Here's an email from Olivia, who says she has a 9-year-old godchild, also concerned about climate change, but their staple diet is overwhelmingly meat-based, and the primary school they go to offers a vegetarian option on just 1 day a week. I don't know whether, Olivia, that can be true, because there must be vegetarian kids at the school or there almost certainly are, who will get a meal. But anyway, she goes on to say, during a recent visit, I noted that the gym area boasted a huge montage collated by the school featuring issues about environmental damage. I think we should make all schools, prisons and public-run entities vegan or vegetarian. If people want meat, then they can eat it at home. Pigwitch says, Caroline, your guest, said, let's not get hung up on the additional costs of different milk, but that's a facile argument For parents on low incomes, milk is cheap and nutritional. They have no choice but to be hung up, so-called, on the cost. Sarah writes to say that she has a 7-year-old daughter who has lots of conversations with her about climate change and about the climate generally. And her daughter, she says, would like there to be a kind of international anthem about making the climate better. Apparently, Sarah's daughter said to her, "We need an anthem for the world, like a beans on toast song." I just love the way her mind works, says Sarah. She speaks about these things with such hope. Music can be uplifting and very thought-provoking. Sarah, thank you for that, and good luck to your daughter. I don't know the Beans on Toast song, but I do love Beans on Toast. I'd quite like to know what the song is. Timmy says,